Winery Dogs is exciting for me because it's a chance to once again kind of tap into another genre. It's not a prog band, it's not a metal band, and almost everything I've done in my career has been rooted in either prog or metal. But the Winery Dogs is just a straight up rock band, you know, in the vein of Zeppelin or Van Halen or Deep Purple. So, you know, it's a chance for me to tap into those classic rock elements that are a huge part of my background. And, you know, I've done some classic rock tributes in the past for Paul Gilbert. We did a Beatles tribute and a Zeppelin tribute and a Who tribute. But that's probably the extent of you know, me being able to tap into that style and sound. So the Winery Dogs gives me a chance to do that with an original band. Well, that's the thing about this band. It's a classic rock band, and it's a very song-oriented band. But obviously, you have three guys that are musicians that can play. So at any given moment, any of the three of us can do something that's out of the ordinary or something that's, you know, exciting musically or in terms of technique, but never losing focus on, you know, the song at hand. And that's kind of the way, you know, some of those classic rock bands were. You know, if you look at Led Zeppelin or Cream or Jimi Hendrix Experience, that was kind of what those bands were about, you know, song-oriented, straight-ahead classic rock, but with guys that can play and have chops. And, you know, I think this band definitely falls into that format. Well, first of all, I get my inspiration by the musicians I surround myself with. If I was to sit in my drum room at home and play by myself and practice, I'd be bored to tears. I'm just not that type of drummer. I'm more of a team player and a collaborator. So my constant inspiration in every band and project I'm a part of is the incredible musicians surrounding me. So that's my inspiration. But once I'm playing, you know, it's important for me to always keep the drumming interesting, regardless of what genre I'm playing in, whether it's a progressive band or a metal band or just a straight-up rock band like the Winery Dogs. No matter what the genre is, I want it to always still sound like Mike Portnoy. I want it to still have personality and the drums to be interesting. I don't ever want to sound like a drummer that could be one of thousands of drummers playing that part. I want it to always sound like Mike Portnoy, no matter what the context is. Well, odd time signatures is obviously something that has been a huge part of my background, and it was a huge part of everything I did specifically with Dream Theater. And I've always been fascinated by numbers and how they apply to rhythm. And I always think of them in terms of patterns. I'm not one of those type of drummers that says, oh, I have no idea if I'm playing in 7 or 9, you know, I just do it by feel. I very much think about the numbers and think of the patterns. And one of the things I always used to do in Dream Theater was take a riff or a piece of music, and if it's, you know, if it's something that's in, let's say, 7 and 9 or whatever, alternating, you know, I'll add that up and kind of, you know, break it down into different groups of, you know, 5s or you know, 7s. And, you know, I'll always look at a pattern or a piece of music in terms of numbers, and every odd time signature is basically a variation of a 2 or a 3. So it's very easy to look at any odd time signature and make heads or tails out of it. And for me, it just comes very natural. You know, I've made a career out of that type of playing and that type of thinking. And it's just as natural for me to play in 7, 9, or 11 as it is to play in 4. No, I was into it even before we formed Dream Theater. It was something I was very interested in. And it basically stems from my love of progressive rock music. And you know, I was listening to a lot of Rush and Yes and Genesis. And those bands were, you know, playing all these patterns and parts that were in 5 and 7 and 9. And, you know, that's basically how I learned odd time signatures. I went and got like the Rush songbook and sheet music, and I would sit there and listen to the records and count the time signatures while reading the sheet music. So, okay, that's a 5 and that's a 7, and I was very, very interested in that in high school when I was a teenager. So by the time I went to Berkeley, I was pretty well versed in all that kind of stuff, and that became the foundation for which Dream Theater built their music on. Well, I could only recommend the albums that inspired me as a drummer. So, those would be the early Rush catalog. Specifically for me was Hemispheres, Permanent Waves, and Moving Pictures. Those three in particular really gave me a great background in progressive drumming and odd time signatures. Also, in the similar vein would be the early S albums, Fragile and Close to the Edge. Then Terry Bozzio's stuff was a big influence on me as well. If I had to pick only a couple of his, I would probably say UK's Danger Money album, or maybe Missing Persons Spring Session M. Simon Phillips on Jeff Beck's There and Back was a big influence on me. I don't know. And then there's the metal stuff, obviously. I grew up with early Metallica and Anthrax and Slayer. So, some of those albums, like Metallica's Master of Puppets, Slayer's Rain and Blood, and Anthrax's Among the Living. Well, that's what makes a drummer is a range of influences. And it's not just the technical or the metal drummers too. I mean, I'm just as inspired. With all the albums I just named, I didn't even name my top 3 drummers, which are Ringo, Keith Moon, and John Bonham. So, there you go. I just gave you a list of some of my biggest drumming albums, none of which even had my top 3 drummers. So it's all about the range and variety. Dead would be Frank Zappa. He's always been my biggest musical hero, and to have played with him would have been one of my ultimate dreams. And then as far as alive, my three biggest musical heroes that are still alive, that I would drop everything on my schedule to play with, would be Roger Waters, Paul McCartney, and Pete Townsend. Now, the secret is having a great endorsement company that acts your ideas. I would never have been able to build any of those monster kits without the support of Tama Drums and a good drum tech as well. So those are the 2 secrets: a good drum tech and a good drum company. And I've been fortunate to have a great relationship with Tama Drums for over 20 years now, where they basically will make any of my drumming dreams come true. Anything I could think of, they'll build it for me. So I'm very fortunate to be in a position to have that kind of support, and I appreciate that. My kit changes depending on the band. Obviously, those big monster kits I had for Dream Theater were appropriate for Dream Theater. But I kind of change my setup depending on the band and what's appropriate and needed for a band. My time with Avenged Sevenfold and Adrenaline Mob, I was playing more of a traditional big heavy metal double bass kit. When I play with Transatlantic or Flying Colors or Neil Morse, it's a bit more of a scaled-down progressive kit. And now what I'm using with the Winery Dogs is just a classic rock 5-piece kit, traditional John Bonham type setup with just 1 bass drum and 1 rack and 2 floor toms. It's what's appropriate for what I'm playing. I don't let my kit dictate the music. I let the music dictate my kit. Well, you have better odds because you're going to stand out and you're going to be, a little bit more unique. So actually, it actually works in your favor. I think that was why Dream Theater succeeded in the early 90s, because we were one of the few bands playing progressive music in a time that was run by grunge. So it made us stand out, and it helped our success. So the same could be said for a female breaking into any genre that is male-dominated. It's going to make them stand out that much more. And if they're talented and if they have the goods, then they will succeed. Oh, man. Well, being on the road is, every day it's like a scene out of Spinal Tap. Everything that happened in the Spinal Tap is the God's honest truth, and anybody that's been a touring musician can vouch for that. I've done everything from falling off stages to breaking limbs on stage to, getting lost or getting left behind. It's all happened. Literally every scene out of Spinal Tap has happened to me. So go watch Spinal Tap, and there you go. There's your answer, because every single thing that's happened in there is true. Don't do it.
Okay.
You know what? I've made a career out of following my heart, and I do what I do for the love of music. I don't do it for the money. I don't do it for the success. If you look at what I've done since leaving Dream Theater almost 3 years ago, all of those decisions I've made are based on being happy in the different musical environments, both personally and creatively. And I've made those decisions based on following my heart, and if you follow your heart, you'll never be wrong. Well, my focus for the remainder of 2013 is indeed the Winery Dogs. So that is what I'm going to spend the remainder of my year focusing on. But that being said, inevitably there's a million things in the oven. So some of those are, there's a couple of live DVDs and Blu-rays coming out from tours I did last year. So there'll be a live Flying Colors Blu-ray and a live PSMS Blu-ray, which is Portnoy, Sheehan, McAlpine, Sherinian. So those are forthcoming in the next couple months, as well as a new album by a band called Big Elf that I played on. I did that last year as well, so that's going to be surfacing in the next couple months. And then I've also begun laying down groundwork for things that will surface next year, most notably the fourth Transatlantic album and the sophomore Flying Colors albums. So we begin work on those, and those will hit in 2014. So that's stuff from the past, present, and future, but right now the present